Hi YouTube world. So I'm doing this live stream because I just did a live stream on Rumble of my latest YouTube videos, and quite a few people were watching. And but I just think it's ironic that I'm allowed to stream on Rumble my videos that are on YouTube, but I'm not allowed to stream on YouTube my videos that are on YouTube. I mean, what's up with that? Right? Because the last time I did a live stream on YouTube of my videos that were already on YouTube, a countdown of the most popular ones, it was stopped midway through the stream, YouTube saying because it's copyrighted. Just about all of my videos on YouTube are copyrighted, but when I upload them to YouTube, YouTube indicates that those are videos that the copyright owner has allowed to be on YouTube. So that's how they got to be on YouTube in the first place. So I don't know why YouTube has a problem with it when those very same content that's already on there that they've told me is allowed to be on there is part of a live stream. Then all hell breaks loose. They cut the live stream, and any future live streams that I attempted to do, they weren't even allowing me to update the thumbnail image. And so for a while I was stuck with the thumbnail image that said YouTube sucks, which was the one that I had prior to this, for the video live stream I did prior to this all happening. And they wouldn't let me change it without doing a two-step verification involving my phone number that is not easy for me to do because my phone number has changed as a result of my divorce. So that's how I got locked out of my first YouTube channel. Anyways, so this is all pretty crazy, but I can still stream my YouTube videos on Rumble, but I can't stream my YouTube videos on YouTube for anything that's copyrighted. Okay. So, but I don't want to leave YouTube out, right? So I did a live stream on Rumble. I think I should do a live stream on YouTube as well. So what am I going to put in this live stream? I'm not allowed to put in my videos that are already on YouTube because they're copyrighted, even though YouTube said that they're allowed to be on there. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. I can only basically safely within following the community guidelines of YouTube, I can only live stream content that is entirely copyright free. All right. So that pretty much leaves the stuff, my political social commentary in my Tommy Talks playlist. So I just didn't want to leave YouTube out. Since I did a Rumble live stream of YouTube videos, now I'm going to do a YouTube live stream of copyright-free content that is also incidentally already on YouTube. Okay, and this one is called Indigenous Privilege. So here we go. YouTube world. So I'm doing this live stream to talk about something controversial. Now, I've never been someone to back away from the controversial, although lately I have been, I have kind of not really been diving right into controversial subjects because I'm trying to keep in a positive mindset. Okay, and sometimes controversial subjects can bring my mood down. So I'm trying to not let that happen. But it can't be an absolute. Sometimes all controversy cannot be avoided. We live in a world where things are contested and controversy surrounds us. So it can't be completely avoided. And I don't think it's beneficial ultimately to completely avoid all controversy. So here I am diving headlong into a very controversial topic. I'm going to start by just reading this news article, and then I'm going to give you my comments after I'm finished reading it. So this was in the Vancouver Sun earlier this year on January 19th, 2023. There's been a lot of reports about this particular case. So this is not the only article, but this is the one I've selected to read for today. So the headline says, "Retired Senator Stunned by Reports about Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafon's Heritage." Okay, so that Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, the article is probably going to say it, but I'll just say it right now. She was a high-profile advocate for kids in care, kids in foster care in the province of British Columbia in Canada. Okay, and this is a senator, so talking. So the former senator, a Cree and Chinese Canadian, says she celebrated as Turpel Lafond became Saskatchewan's first Indigenous female judge in 1998. Okay, so before she was this advocate for kids in care in BC, Turpel Lafond became the first supposedly Indigenous female judge in 1998 in the province of Saskatchewan. Okay, so she did other things in her career before she came to BC. So here it is. Here's the article. Retired Senator Lillian Dick said she was stunned to see reports last fall questioning the Indigenous heritage of former Judge Mary Ellen Turpel Lafond, whose story she had related to and whose career she had celebrated. Past tense. Dick, who is Cree and Chinese Canadian, said Thursday she thought hallelujah as Turpel Lafond became Saskatchewan's first Indigenous female judge in 1998. It was wonderful to know Turpel Lafond had overcome the numerous challenges Indigenous women disproportionately face in their personal lives and careers, said the professor emeritus in psychiatry at the University of Saskatchewan. And then I found out it was all a facade. Dick said a CBC investigation convinced her that Turpel Lafond lied about being Indigenous, specifically Cree, causing real harm by exploiting the identity of Indigenous women, of whom many in Canada are underserved and vulnerable. Canadians know now Indigenous women are more likely to face violence, more likely to be murdered, made missing, and she's used that identity to enhance her curriculum vitae. And to me, that was like the lowest thing you could do. Dick is among the signatories of a statement released this week calling on 10 universities to revoke the honorary degrees conferred on Turpel Lafond. Eight of the 10 schools the Indigenous Women's Collective singled out have confirmed they're taking steps to review the matter, while two have yet to respond to requests for comment sent Wednesday. Dick said she read the citations linked to the honorary degrees, many of which mentioned Turpel Lafond's supposed lived experiences as an Indigenous person. She looks as though she's really risen to the top, despite all the barriers people like myself have had to face, said Dick, whose mother's government-recognized Cree status was stripped from her when she married Dick's Chinese father. The appropriation of Indigenous identity by so-called pretendians deprives Indigenous people of jobs and opportunities to make change for the better, Dick said, adding that it also affects future generations of Indigenous children. The Indigenous Women's Collective says its members want to ensure their children's and grandchildren's indigeneity will be respected and protected. Any organization or leader claiming to uphold truth and reconciliation must denounce any infringements, the statement adds. The statement was issued on Tuesday after Vancouver Island University announced Turpel Lafond had returned a 2013 honorary doctorate of laws. The school had told her it was under review due to requests from the collective and members of the university community. Reached by phone on Wednesday, Turpel Lafond declined to comment on the calls for her honorary degrees to be revoked or the university's review processes. She previously told the CBC that while she was growing up, she didn't question the biological parentage of her father, who she has said was Cree. Turpel Lafond served as British Columbia's representative for children and youth, and until last month, she was a tenured law professor at the University of BC. Until last year, she also served as the academic director of the Indian Residential School History and Dialogue Center at the university. In addition to the CBC investigation, Dick said Turpel Lafond's evasion in response to questions about her heritage have contributed to Dick's conclusion that she is not Indigenous, with status recognized by the federal government. It would have been so easy for her to prove her identity if she's claiming to be a Treaty Cree Indian. All she had to do was pull out her treaty card. Along with revoking Turpel Lafond's honorary degrees, Dick said she wants to see the universities take a stand, stating publicly, it's wrong and unacceptable to pretend to be Indigenous, and there should be consequences such as termination. The University of Regina, along with Carleton, McGill, Brock, Royal Roads, Mount St. Vincent, and St. Thomas universities, have all confirmed they've taken steps to look into Turpel Lafon's case. A statement from Simon Fraser University said a committee had been formed to put a policy in place that includes procedures for revoking an honorary degree. It said once that policy is approved, the university will determine the next steps. Responses haven't been received from Thompson Rivers and York universities. Interesting. Thompson Rivers University, hardly a university, is here in Kamloops. And so it has a very high percentage of Native or Indigenous students. So it's interesting that that was one of the ones that had not responded, at least at the time that this article was written back in January. So, a few comments to make about this. First of all, I'm not stunned. All these bigwigs are stunned, but I'm not stunned. And I have a suspicion a lot of people aren't really all that stunned by this story. It's not really the first example of somebody pretending, falsely claiming, lying essentially, to have ancestry that is native, and in fact that they're not. Now, probably the biggest, highest profile example that comes to mind immediately of that would be the Democrat politician in the United States. She was a presidential candidate. What's her name? What's her name? I can't think of her name now. Um, I can't think of her name because I can only think of that Trump calls her Pocahontas, as a like faux, like as in false, like Faux, as opposed to Pocahontas. Like, what's her actual name? Oh my goodness, now I have to look that up. What is Pocahontas's real name? Oh my God. Pocahontas. I'm sure it'll tell us. Just go like that. There she is. There she is. What's her name? Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren. So she's somebody who claimed to have Native ancestry in the United States. And much like this case with Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafon, she used that to benefit her career, okay, to get awards and scholarships. It was a way for her to benefit and to her career benefited from it. That would be the motive, okay, for making these lies, spreading these lies about one's ancestry. And so, but there's been other cases too. There's actually been several cases. That's just the highest profile. There's also cases where people have claimed falsely to be Black. And there was somebody who was a high profile activist for Black people in the United States, African Americans, and that this person was found to be lying and was not, in fact, Black. So it's not really the first time that this has happened, so I wouldn't be all that stunned by it. Now, why do you suppose that this is happening? Well, what it reminds me of, because I grew up watching the Oprah Winfrey Show, and I remember, like, probably back in the 80s, I remember Oprah did a show on the whole topic. What they called was passing. Passing was the lingo that was used. And what that was talking about was, you know, in the past, so this show was in the past in the 80s, but in the past from then, so like decades before then, in the earlier part of the 20th century, that it was quite a common practice for Black people in the United States, African Americans, to pretend to be white. Now, maybe not fully Black people, maybe they were half Black or a quarter Black or something like that. But if they were light-skinned enough, sufficiently light-skinned, but still a black person, but sufficiently light-skinned that they could pass as white, then some would do that because of the benefits that would accrue to them if society perceived them as white. And so this was, an example of the real systemic, the word systemic definitely applies in that case, systemic racism that Black people in the United States faced during the 20th century, where it would be to someone's benefit, if they're Black, to let people think that they're white because of all the benefits that would flow from that. Now, um, right? Whereas if people perceived them as they actually were, as Black, then they wouldn't get that they'd lose out on all those benefits. That truly is an example of white, so-called white privilege, which is a concept I'm very critical of, skeptical of. But I mean, certainly in the past, in the United States, it did exist. Maybe not now, but it did exist in the past. And that Oprah show talking about Black people passing, and that's why they use the term passing, passing themselves off as white. Their motive was to experience the benefits of white privilege in a systemically racist country as the United States was at that time. Okay, so now we have a bit of a role reversal here. We have instead of non-white people passing as white, we have the opposite thing happen. We have white people passing as being non-white. Same motive though. It's to get benefits. It's to advance someone's career. So isn't this just such a powerful demonstration that there really is no such thing as white privilege, at least in Canada, in today's context, in the 21st century? This is happening in the 21st century. So, um, to claim that white privilege is a thing, that it exists, that white people are privileged simply due to their white skin color and ancestry, and that this is systemic uh, privilege across the board. Um, like that simply doesn't hold up to the empirical reality. Well, then why would we have people, white people, pretending to not be white? If it's such a privilege that comes with being white, why would they want to renounce those privileges? Well, they don't want to renounce privileges. They want to be privileged, and they're seeing that the way to get privilege or to get status or to advance their career is through pretending to be non-white, specifically pretending to be Indigenous or Native, as was the case with Mary Ellen Turpel Lafont. Okay, so I really think that this is a real shows that just all this uh, rhetoric that we're hearing that's really gone mainstream, and I mean, it's from the woke side, but it's gone mainstream about white privilege. I mean, maybe it was a thing in the past. Certainly, I think it was, but not anymore. The fact that this is happening and that this isn't just a one-off, it's happening quite a bit, is shows to me that no, there's actually more of a privilege associated with being Indigenous than there is with being white. And that certainly resonates with my experiences. I mean, just as someone who's struggling with housing, like the housing options available to me in the province of British Columbia would be so much greater if I simply were Indigenous, as that is currently defined. So that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this. It just makes a mockery of the whole idea of white privilege, or that by the same token, that Indigenous people are somehow underprivileged. It just makes a mockery of that. Because there would be no reason for somebody to pretend to be Indigenous unless they were getting something out of it. So there can be no privilege associated with being white. So, yeah, I would also like to question some other things. So, Canadians know now Indigenous women are more likely to face violence, more likely to be murdered, made missing, and she's used that identity to enhance her curriculum vitae, right? Like even the senator, Indigenous senator herself, is saying she used that identity to enhance her curriculum vitae. Like that was the motive. So to get privilege, to enhance her curriculum vitae, resume, to build up her resume, to puff up her resume, she claimed to be Indigenous. That was the motive. Okay. And but I would like to question the first part of that sentence. Canadians know now. Well, I'm a Canadian, and I don't really know this to be true. That Indigenous women are more likely to face violence, more likely to be murdered, made missing. Really? They are? They are more likely than compared to who? Who are you comparing? Who are you comparing it to? First of all, I guess I have to ask that. Are you, because it says Indigenous women are more likely. More like, are they comparing that to Indigenous men? It could be. I mean, there's part of the sentence is missing here, but like, what is the comparison point? Or are they saying the indigenous part is the irrelevant part, so that indigenous people, women or men, would be more likely to face violence, murdered, made missing, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know either one of those cases to be true, that it's indigenous or that it's women who are more likely to face those things. I really don't know that to be the case. So I don't like it to be said that Canadians now know this. I don't know this to be a fact. I know that the violence that men experience is very much underreported. And I know that the vast majority of homeless people in Vancouver are, in fact, men. So I would question that women are getting such a raw deal here in comparison to other groups when men are really having a tough go of it. And then the Indigenous part, well, which I think that's probably the more relevant category in this article. Well, I don't know that that to be true. Now, it could be true that Indigenous are more likely to face violence, more likely to be murdered, made missing. I mean, I don't know. I want to see the stats, though. I'm not going to just go off of this and say that that's true. I know that there's been several cases of like high profile cases of street prostitutes in BC being murdered and going missing. The missing women epidemic has been truly a crime against humanity, the amount of missing women in the province of BC. And the Willie Pickton case was a high profile case where this pig farmer in suburban Vancouver would go into downtown Vancouver, the east side, and pick up prostitutes, take them back to his pig farm and murder them, and then put them through the rendering equipment for the processing of the pork. Oh my God, it was like what a horror story that was. But the way that that has been remembered and celebrated, I've certainly, well, not celebrated, but remembered, memorialized. There's many memorials in Vancouver. It's and the way that it's been talked about in the media, it's always made to talk about the victims were Indigenous. The victims of Willie Pickton were Indigenous. Look at this horrible thing that happened to Indigenous women. Now, certainly a lot of his victims were Indigenous, but not all of them. I don't even know if the majority of them were. But I mean, to talk to a young person now, the way that that story has been portrayed, you would practically think that all of them were Indigenous. All the victims of Willie Pickton were Indigenous. No, they weren't. I don't even know if it was a majority. A lot of the victims were actually white women, white prostitutes, or other races too, black and other races. I mean, he had victims of many different races. But as that story has been memorialized and talked about, it seems that the other races of victims have just all but been forgotten, and it's been socially constructed as an Indigenous issue. Whereas Indigenous women were certainly among the victims. Probably, I would say it's a fair bet to say that they were disproportionately victimized, yes, but not even that the majority of the victims were Indigenous. So this kind of talk really runs the risk of erasing from view and rendering invisible other identity categories that experience victimization. Okay, so that's what I would say in response to that little sentence right there. So no, I'm a Canadian, and I actually don't know that to be true. And the other thing I wanted to say is, so I really have a problem. It's interesting that in this article, this super politically correct article, that the word Indian comes up quite a bit, and so that's good. Uh, it's a word that is still in usage in Canada due to legal reasons. For instance, the director of the Indian Residential School History and Dialogue Center at the university, that they would use that word Indian in the name of the center at UBC, which is like a bastion of political correctness. So it just goes to show that that word is still has currency. And whereas the other word that's being floated around is Indigenous. Now, I just wanted to say it's not something I really get into very often. I would say that I am Indigenous, and I'm not pretending about it. I'm not pretending when I say that. But I would also say that I'm white. So, yeah, I'm a white person and I'm Indigenous, and that is not a contradiction. Most people would probably think that it is, but it's not, because according to the United Nations, if your family or community has lived in a certain region for at least 400 years, then you are considered Indigenous to that region. Well, I've traced my ancestry in North America going back further than 400 years. So by the United Nations, I would be considered Indigenous. I'm talking about my white settler family roots going back in North America more than 400 years. So uh, I am Indigenous and I don't need to have a drop of Native blood in me to qualify. Now, that doesn't mean that I would qualify as Indigenous under Canada's legal regime in terms of being a status Indian. No, I would not, and I would not claim to be that. But this other word that's being floated around, Indigenous, is less precise of a category. It's not a legal word, like you're either a status Indian or not. Well, Indigenous is more of an identity category. It's not actually a legal term, not yet in Canada, at least. And it's a word that's relatively recent to our lexicon. And I really have problem. I think it's a problematic term. Indigenous is invasive. So every time we use that word Indigenous, like it's very it implies anybody else who's not Indigenous, by definition, is an invader. And I find that problematic. Like, I'm not an invader. I was born in Canada, and I have ancestors in Canada and the United States, in North America, going back 400 years. So it's quite offensive to me to be regarded as an invader, or for it to even be implied that I would be an invader or that I would be invasive in some way. No, I'm in the country where I was born, and I'm not, in fact, an invader. So that's why I don't really like using the word Indigenous, because it's like calling myself, and not just myself, like everybody else who's around me, immigrants and people who are born here, just everyone who's not native, it's like calling those people invaders. And that to me is rude and also inaccurate. So I tend to use the word native or aboriginal when I'm talking about these issues. That's my preferred terms. Um, and so what else did I want to say about that? Right? And like, oh, reconciliation. It mentioned something in this article about reconciliation. So supposedly Canada has had a reconciliation process between Indigenous, so-called Indigenous groups and the larger, broader Canadian society. I would like to say, no, it hasn't. There is, in fact, no reconciliation, despite all the fanfare made by the politicians and the media, because reconciliation, like the two first letters of that word, re, means it's a two-way street. Like it has to have some kind of reciprocity to it. So this process has been more like top down and imposed on people. But like, first of all, there has to be open dialogue and free speech in like as a prerequisite for any reconciliation on any topic. Like, like say we're talking about a marriage that broke apart, a husband and a wife, they're getting a divorce, but then they come together and they decide that they don't want to have a divorce after all. They're going to reconcile and save their marriage. That's a type of a reconciliation right there. But of course, that is a two-way street. In order for that to work, both the husband and the wife both have to be speaking on speaking terms with each other and have to come to some kind of an agreement. Uh, okay, so we don't have that situation in Canada because essentially we don't have free speech. So, at least one side, perhaps both sides, but I'm not going to speak for the other side, but at least one side of this equation has not had free speech. Like white people, so-called settler people, have not been able to speak honestly about the kinds of things that are on our minds when it comes to this, because we will be censored and effectively shut out from this process. So that means, how can there be reconciliation? It's not a reconciliation if at least one side, perhaps both sides. I mean, probably I bet a lot of Native people would say that they have this problem too, and that they felt left out from the reconciliation process and that they didn't have a chance to speak about it. Probably that would be true, but I'm not going to speak for them. But at the very least, the white people side has not had that. So it's not a reconciliation then. There is no reconciliation. If there's no free speech, there like it's impossible to have reconciliation without free speech, and we don't have free speech. So that's all I have to say about that. And I just think it makes such a mockery of political correctness. And a lot of people in the comment section, by the way, and these are the comments that managed to get through that weren't censored, have similar thoughts as I do. So yeah, just wanted to say that. And maybe I'll have some more thoughts later on, but that's it for now. Peace out for now.
Hello, this is Sarah with a reading for the collective.